Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today's guest is strength coach, best-selling author, and entrepreneur Chris Duffin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. The question today is, how do you build strength that sets you free? That is the title of our program. What is real strength? How do we build strength that sets us free? How do we build not just physical strength, but emotional strength, the ability to persevere and solve the challenges natural to any human life? And how do we build strength of mind and strength of character? These are the topics I dive into with one of the strongest men in the world today, Chris Duffin. His life story is worthy of a documentary movie. All the archetypes of the hero's journey are well represented in his story, as you will soon see. Chris shares his trials and tribulations of life, the perils of steroid use, and much more. There is great wisdom here that anyone can use to live a better life. Enjoy my dialogue with strongman, inventor, entrepreneur, husband, father, and coach, Chris Duffin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Living 4D. Today we have the fun of switching topics from some of our usual topics of scientists and metaphysicians and quantum physics to strength development. And we're going to have a really good, deep conversation on strength and what strength really is. And I've titled this podcast, Building Strength That Sets You Free, baby, so that we do it for the right reasons. And our guest today is Chris Duffin, who is a world-famous strength athlete. He has multiple world records in powerlifting. He's the author of a great book about his life titled The Eagle and the Dragon, a story of strength and revelation, which is really quite interesting and has a lot of great pictures and good story. And my buddy Mike Slemmy informs me that Chris is the real deal. So Chris, thanks for being the real deal. And I thought that your story, your life, and your intentions for humanity and your willingness to share what strength development can do for us all is a gift to the world. So welcome to Living 4D, Chris.
Thank you. It's been looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. You know, Chris, from what I've heard and what I've seen in your book, you've certainly had a firewalk in your developmental years, and I had a lot of empathy for you. I was like, oh, yes, I come from that same kind of very tumultuous, crazy, unpredictable background. And so I'd love it for the listeners if you could share a biographical sketch of your life, the challenges that you worked through, and the influences that ultimately led to making meaning in your life.
Yeah, sure thing. A quick note, though. First, I guess you're still staying on the theme of scientists and such. I've got my my award for scientific innovation over there on the wall.
Oh, good.
Because that's still the world I play in. But
what did you innovate?
It was given to me by my old my engineering school for the innovation I brought around improving biomechanics.
As
great! A result of the products that I designed. So the background. It's an interesting story. I try not to make it a story about woe is me or anything like that, but it's a really great scope and perspective that I've had over my life. So I grew up homeless in the wilderness.
That's wild.
We're talking, a level of poverty that we don't really see that much today when people talk about, I've got it hard, but they've still got their gaming system, their smartphones, that sort of nice clothes.
Starbucks.
And, yeah. So we're talking like at 6 years old. We were, as a family, living in, beams lashed into the trees because there was rattlesnake dens around. And there was no home. There was no nothing. It was just out in the mountains. There's a little stream and a meadow next to us. And I, at 6 years old, was being taught how to capture and handle live rattlesnakes because that's the environment I lived in. And that was the only way that I could safely be, is to know how to handle my surroundings, know how to handle the fear, know how to handle those sorts of things. And so, but the course to my upbringing was mixed in and out of that type of environment, as well as, moving towards town for the school year, maybe in a condemned home, maybe something nicer, often lacking either running water or electricity. During the summer, it might be filling up jugs of water down in the stream and setting them up in the sun on a rock so that they heat up so you can bathe. Or during the winter, heating up water on the wood stove so you could step out back in the snow and dumping it over your head so you can kind of wash and not smell as bad as. And, it's a different type of environment. So this is Northern California and then later in Eastern Oregon. But in the Northern California area, those deep wood areas, a lot of people don't understand, like, my parents chose to not be part of society. But oftentimes the people that live in those environments are doing so for a reason. So there was run-ins with murderers. There was drug running, drug abuse, alcohol abuse around me. I dealt with a serial killer, actually saved my mother from him once, but then he came back around, which is a whole nother story around a pedophile and human trafficking ring that took my sisters and myself for a year before things happened, which involved the police. And anyway, it's covered in the course of the book. It's really hard for me to kind of dive into some of those things.
Yeah, it's very intense.
It's intense. And then, so, the Reader's Digest version ended up moving up to Eastern Oregon. My parents got out of the drug trade after losing us for the year, so that they didn't have the chance of doing that again, but quickly fell back into, we don't want to be part of society. So we're up in the mountains, mining, doing lumber, cutting wood, mostly mining. And, my thing during that time was we read nonstop. That's the only thing. No TV, no radio. It was the monthly trip to the library and just stacks of books. That was what my whole family did. Researched everything, read and consumed nonstop, reading by flashlight, candlelight. And then the physical things, like I would just disappear into the wilderness and hike, and I'd go running, and I just like seek these ways to like push my body to the limit. And in the course of high school, I ended up finding this stuff started working pretty well for me. Right.
It's with the challenges, of course, it's not easy, but this is the kind of environment that produces somebody that can operate from the non-consensus reality and come into consensus and see where people are stuck and where they're lost.
Yeah. So this is like what my value, I think, that I've gotten out of this. And then also the further scope of my life, which changed quite a bit from there, is the ability. I have a disconnect. Like, people want to talk about TV shows and culture and stuff from the different periods. Like, I obviously have big gaps, but I also don't. I have a different look, a different perspective on things because I'm not tied to a lot of that. Right.
Right.
But so I ended up doing really well. I was a valedictorian. I was a state level athlete, and I got myself a full ride scholarship to go to school for a dual engineering degree. And while I was going to school, things during my young upbringing, I was kind of the one responsible for raising my 3 younger sisters and my little brother while they were out either tending crops or mining or so on. And things fell apart when I left. Apparently I was had a stabilizing force, and things got really bad at home.
Wow.
And so I ended up, while I was going to school, starting to take custody of my 3 younger sisters. And I raised my 3 younger sisters while I did my engineering degrees, worked full time.
Wow.
There's no turn back. There's no fallback plan anywhere in my life. There's no couch to go home to. Room, a couch, nothing. And I've got the survivor mentality of like, not just take care of myself. I've got other people to take care of.
Yeah.
So I raised them while I worked on those degrees, my MBA, and chased my career. And so I ended up becoming, over the course of my career, a turnaround executive. So I would be brought in to turn around a division of a company or a whole company itself, grow something from a regional to national to international presence, maybe fix a company and and prep it for sale. I did that with an aerospace company. So I worked in aerospace manufacturing, automotive manufacturing, heavy equipment, and high tech. And I lifted some weights during all this too.
Yeah, I was going to say there's got to be some weightlifting in there.
Yeah. So I always forget about that. But I started lifting really early in 1988 when I was about 12. Like I said, I was just physically active, and then I picked up weights, and it just kind of never left. And I started competing in 2000, did pretty well. And I ended up, during the course of my powerlifting career, was like ranked number 1 in the world for like 8 years straight. And anyway, so I get to this point in 2014, where my kids now, I've got a house with white picket fence. I'm married. I have an amazing career where I'm sought after, making lots of money. I've got, like I said, I own 2 homes. I was building a third. I had all the retirement mass, all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
I'm not happy. And I'm like, why am I not happy? And I I really took a hard look at my life. And I'd been, like I said, lifting, and I'd been developing these relationships with a lot of clinicians and doing continuing ed in the clinical world. And as I was doing that, I was starting to see gaps over the years. I did it because I wanted to be the best athlete I could be. I wanted to realize my strength. I owned a gym. I'd been building all my equipment because everything was wrong in my opinion, or not wrong, but it could be better.
Right. Yeah.
And I had knowledge at this point that I knew I could help people get out of pain and live a better quality of life. And I'm like, do I go back to school and become a doctor? And I'm like, if I do that, it's going to take me a long time. I'm restarting my career, my midlife crisis, if you want to call that. And I can only affect change one person at a time. And I want to have a huge impact. I want to really change the face of fitness all the way through its interaction with clinical care, right? And so I walked away from all that. I walked away from everything in my life. I walked away from competitive lifting.
Wow.
I walked away. It sounds bad, but I told my wife that I wanted a divorce because we were great friends, but that's where it ended. We were good friends. And it wasn't enough for me anymore. I walked away from my career. I sold all my homes. I sold everything that I had. I leveraged my entire my retirement and lost everything. I'm living in an apartment, not paying myself for a couple of years, found in Kabuki strength. And that's where it was. And so
did it work?
It worked. So within 5 years, it's a globally recognized brand. We work with 90% of professional sports in America, like 29 of 30 MLB teams as an example. So, I'm not like exaggerating. Any major college you can think of. Movie stars, like The Rock has 8 of our bars, and they're using it on filming on set for all the other actors and stuntmen for Black Adam and Marvel Studios. And, you're in California, like the Lakers, for example, LeBron, the rest of the starting line, they have our equipment at their house, at the Lakers facility, and at their trainer's facility. So it's did that, found love, which was crazy to realize at 40 years old, like, oh my God, this thing in movies and books that I've always read about and thought was like, a fairy tale, like, holy crap, that's real. Like, that's a big side swipe and smack on the side of the. And
you got high on life there for a while, did you?
Yeah, I did. And so got remarried, have 3 kids, and I switched my lifting to exhibitions that I wanted to show, to be able to demonstrate what our education does, how far you can push things and achieve, inspire people, and raise money for education. So I switched to exhibition lifting, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, lifting for the gram, I don't care. And I did that up until this last year, chasing this big, giant, gnarly goal I had. So I reframed my life entirely, every aspect of what was important to me. And so that's kind of detailed in the book, and it's written for the reader. Like, every chapter is a lesson about, like, kind of driving people to introspection. And I can't tell you how to live life. I'm not going to try to, but I can certainly help you try to peel back the layers and really understand your North Star, your like driving factors, they sound cheesy, your core values, whatever
those
you
aren't
name,
cheesy. That's the foundation.
They're not. They are the foundation. But like so many people say it and they don't really know what it means,
right?
The depth of it. So that's why I say cheesy, because it's something that people talk about, but very few people actually live it.
Yeah, that's I don't know how much you know about my program and what I teach. It's 7 years of training to go through the institute, but those are right in the very core of the teachings. Get clear on what your dream is, number one.
No, I am familiar. I haven't been through the Chek Institute, but
yeah, no, those are very important things, and anybody that doesn't see the value in them will certainly have a life that reflects that. Because if you're not conscious of your dream and your core values, then you're living from your unconscious, which is largely the program behaviors that are not of your own. So you really have no free will until I tell people, if you don't have core values, you have to realize your yes has no value until you learn to say no. And without a core value, you don't have any way to distinguish when to say yes and when to say no. So you end up living a life and going, why am I in so much pain? Why do I always have money troubles and relationship troubles? Well, because you say yes to what you should be saying no to, but you're not conscious of what you really want yet.
Some of the most valuable things that you can do is know what to say no to.
Yes.
And also just like, here's an analogy I use in my book is like understanding why you want the things that you want is really important. So digging back and I use the example because in fitness world, like they're always the motivation porn, all that stuff, like get your mansion, get your fancy cars, get your whatever. And you may desire that. No judgment, whatever, but why do you want those things? Right.
Yes.
And so if you don't understand the why, so here's the example that I like to use is if you don't understand that why, maybe it's for security. Maybe you know that, hey, once I get to that point, one of my values is security. Like you can imagine that based on my upbringing. Now, some of the other ones are challenge and other things that kind of work in opposition to that. But if you don't understand that that's your vision of having those things means I can take care of myself, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, I might have security for my family, and you just focus on those things, you can over leverage yourself to get those things, to think you have what you want and actually move complete opposite direction. So we're not just talking about wasting your time sidestepping and not moving in the right direction, but we're talking about literally moving 100% in the opposite direction by not understanding and doing the deep dive of why do I want those things that I want in my life? There's a reason, but it's much deeper than the peripheral that's running around in your conscious, right?
Yeah. Joseph Campbell, talking about the hero's journey, says most people spend their entire life climbing the corporate ladder only to get to the top and realize it's leaning against the wrong wall.
Exactly.
Because of exactly what you just said. They're chasing after what they don't realize maybe their parents wanted or told them would make them successful, or what society has deemed success.
Exactly. Here's the norms. Here's the standard expectations. Absolutely.
The movie star concept, if I'm just rich and I have this and I have that, all my problems will be taken care of, not realizing that usually it magnifies the problems because the more expenses you have and the more relationships you have, the more it brings your unconscious material to the surface, except you see it in others and blame them for all your problems, not realizing it's coming from you as a projection.
So along that line, like you would talk about this transition, midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it, when I made these massive shifts, I knew in my prior career, like this is why I had the gym on this side. I had this 9,000 square foot gym while I was running my corporate career coaching. I love helping mentor people, helping people realize that they can accomplish more than they ever thought possible. I love this process of inspiring and helping people get there, providing the tools. And I got that out of my corporate career. I absolutely got that because to me, it wasn't about the airplane part or this or that, or achieving the business metric, although that felt in the challenge portion, but that's how I was so successful, was the cultural change, which comes about from individual change that I would drive in people. This is how I'd bring transformative change to entire organizations. It doesn't happen from some fancy restructuring plan or this business. All that stuff is useful tools. But at the end of the day, it's this one-on-one and how you can move people. And I love that about my career, but I didn't have was the creative outlet, the ability to do things like I do in the world now. That's just, you see, even in my walking away from competitions,
right?
I created my own metrics, I had creativity in that. And then the passion, like I'm a passionate person. I have to have passion about everything that I do. Otherwise, that's why I made the personal changes. And it wasn't just my ex-wife, it was other key, relationships that were in my life that I had to, okay, these are not aligned with how I want to live. And I'm going to make some changes because I wanted passion in all areas of my life, or I didn't want to waste my time with it and focus on the things. And that's where Kabuki Strength is. I'm so passionate about helping people get out of pain and live a better quality life through developing resilience, developing strength. And so those are things I didn't have. And it was like, I had some of my values present in my career. And I think that's an important thing, though, because so many people like, I need to change everything, but they don't actually look at what they're currently doing and going,
Yes.
Here, I actually have a whole lot of if I actually shift my focus. So instead of like, here's my focus is on building this business and doing these other things, it's like, no, my focus is actually building people. And I'm really enjoying this side of it. I'm going to get those other things out of it. But that can really reframe your work relationship, right? If you understand those key pieces.
There's a saying I teach all of my students: the pain is seldom where the actual problem is. For example, I've seen many cases of rotator cuff problems that wouldn't heal even after surgery, but what most doctors and therapists overlook is that the right shoulder is under influence from the liver and the left shoulder the stomach. Once we apply the principles of detoxification, support digestion, and clear parasites, presto, shoulders start healing and working beautifully again, which is always a shock to the therapists and doctors when they find out how their past client was helped by a Chek professional. After this past year, the clients we see will demonstrate this even more than ever due to using fast and often sugary foods, coffee, alcohol, smoking, and drugs as coping mechanisms while exercising less and spending more time staring at screens. But if you learn to see people holistically, like I teach my students in Holistic Lifestyle Coaching Level 1, you begin to see the true source of our illnesses and injuries. HLC 1 teaches you many essential approaches to health and well-being, such as how to assess what key body systems are under too much stress and how to restore balance, the importance of identifying a realistic dream goal or objective that inspires each individual to stick to their healing program and make the short and long-term changes that are necessary, my universally applicable 1, 2, 3, 4 formula for assessing and correcting challenges, how to breathe optimally to enhance energy levels and mental clarity, how to use gentle movements to work in and enhance life force energy and support optimal immune function, how the function and health of the soil that food is grown in influences all systems of the body, including our mental emotional stability, and much more. HLC 1 is just a small part of what we teach our Chek Academy students, our education system for elite trainers and health professionals. Gavin Jennings and I designed the Academy to take you from wherever you are right now, even if you have no fitness or health education, to being one of the best holistic health and performance professionals on this planet. And as a Chek Academy student, you'll be able to help a lot of people reach their health goals in ways you never imagined. There is, in my opinion, nothing more rewarding and meaningful in life than helping other people look, feel, and live better. We are now accepting applications into the Chek Academy, so whether you're wanting to change your career or add a truly effective new dimension to your current skill set, now is the time to apply. Let's make the world a better place together.
You know, you talked about how much intensity there was in your childhood and a lot of your life. And I'm curious, intensity is one of the 4 most common causes of addiction. So if you look at research on addiction, and I talk about this actually in my current podcast that's out right now on making effective choices, but Angeles Arian, who is a shaman and an anthropologist, traveled the world to over 100 countries, and she met with the native tribal people, she met with psychologists, and she had the interest of finding out what is it that leads to addiction in people, because there's so much addiction in the world. And she basically, after 10 years of this research, narrowed it down and found there were 4 common things that, if they were present in a person's life, increased the probability of addiction. And the more of them there was out of these 4, the more likely they were to have some kind of addictive challenge. And one of them was living in an intense environment where parents are out of control, or there's just so much stress that the child's overly exposed to intensity. The next was living in an environment where people focus on what's wrong instead of what's right, which is classic in our culture. Think about going to school. You're always going to get told what you didn't do well, for sure. If you're lucky, you get a pat on the back, but it's generally, if you're not the student's, teacher's pet, then everybody's like, okay, what am I going to do wrong today? Or if your parents are overly religious or overly critical, then there's too much focusing on what's wrong. Next, she found was the need to know, so that people that get into school or have parents that only praise them when they get the answers to questions right, or have knowledge that somehow makes other people happy, they begin to identify themselves as safe and lovable and useful as long as they have something that others need to know. So there's this relentless pursuit of knowledge, which becomes a basis of addiction. What made me want to ask that is, with all that intensity, have you had to deal with addictions? For example, did you find
Yes.
exercise was an addiction, or alcohol, or sex? Or because when we have all that pressure in us, we have to find a way to let it out. And the other thing that I've found with addictions is that a lot of the people that have these challenging childhoods, like both of us did, where there's this intensity addiction, the need to know, and I'll come to the other one, that often that environment produces a child that doesn't feel that they can get love safely. And the neat thing about an addiction is a beer bottle never complains about how you kiss it, nor does a cigarette. Alcohol, drugs, they're all ways of engaging something that makes you feel better without any commitment or pressure or judgment. So typically, when people go down an intense path like you have, they have to find a way to feel safe and a way to alleviate the pressure. So I'm curious, how did you alleviate all that pressure?
So yeah, without a doubt, addiction is an issue I've faced a lot of my life and those around me. I mean, you take the classical eight trauma, or 8 or 9 like main points. I have 8 of the 9 or 7 of the 8. I can't remember. My therapist says, he's like, I don't understand, one, how you're not dead in jail on drugs, let alone as successful as you are. And I'm like, well, basically everybody I grew up with falls in that same category. And my sisters would have if I wasn't there to help build, a platform with that. I mean, I'm not taking responsibility for what they've done, but I helped provide a platform for them to realize, their own shift and move out of that.
Yeah, stabilizing force for them.
Personally, yeah. I mean, I talk about it in my book. I'm open about the fact that I jumped right into it. As soon as I started drinking, I was drinking every single day I'd go for 6 months straight. And
Wow.
And I'd take 2 or 3 days to clear my head. Right. And so we're talking while I was going to school and working full time and all this activity. And that's how I justify it to myself. Right. Well, I work hard, so I'm going to play hard. That's just the way I've earned that right. And that was my justification to myself. And then when it got to a head and I'm like, I have to walk away from this, which is I stepped up and moved from one end of the state to another 400 miles away, changed all my relationships and friends that whole environment. I was trying to quit there and I couldn't. The environment I created this world that kept feeding, and I'm like, I have to leave. And then I switched I was still training, obviously, through all that. That's been a pretty core component of my life, but it was secondary. It was on the peripheral, and I switched to training being my addiction. I'm 100%. I dove in. I'm like, I don't want to have the desire. If I drink, I know I'm going to feel like ass and my training is going to suck the next 2 or 3 days. So I just trained all the time. Right. And so even the passion and the work that I do now, I spend a massive amount of time with my family. That was one of the driving forces of the change, was to create time and space for my family, which is the opposite of what happens with most entrepreneurs. That's
yes.
But I spend probably about 4 hours a day more with my family than I did before. I built my life around this. I'm actually not in an operational role in my business. I'm a
I had to do that too.
Yeah, right. And so
called hiring a CEO.
I have people always automatically introduce me as the CEO because they think that, well, you must be the CEO. You want that title. You want that job. I'm like, no, I've done that before. I don't want that. I have a CEO. I have a CEO who has VPs that work for him and so on. Like I'm there as a mentor. I call myself chief visionary, right? But getting back to it, I create all this space for my family, but I still I can't take a day off. I'm always working. Anytime I get stressed, my wife jokes about it because when I'm like running and doing tasks around the house, working on home improvement, she's like, you're stressed out. Things are bothering you. Because that's what I do. I fill the void with work. That's my addiction, right?
Yeah.
And so 100% and obviously I know I've lived around it. And my sisters, they all faced addiction as well. I mean, it runs in the family. We're a family of alcoholic and drug abusers. This is the
gene
reality.
line.
Yeah. I watched my dad go down that same path.
Well, I'm glad you switched addictions from alcohol to exercise and staying busy, because it's certainly it's a less threatening addiction, and two, because we're all silent teachers and everybody's watching, especially someone like you that's powerful and successful. Rumi says the greatest teacher is the silent teacher and the greatest lover is the silent lover, but we're all teaching all the time and we're all loving all the time, just in the best way that we can. And I think that, I define an addiction as any repeated behavior that does not produce the results a person wants. So that can be, anything from work to exercise to sex to you name it. I mean, playing with your keys, for God's sakes, chewing your fingernails. I've actually worked with people that chew their fingernails so much they've eaten into the nail beds and they've only got half a fingernail and they can't stop doing it.
I have seen that. I've seen that as well.
Yeah. So, it takes a clear sense of your dream and a realization of where there's an imbalance that's stopping you from living the dream. And then the core values to know how to say yes and when to say no. And one of the things that I see with a lot of athletes and strength athletes as well is they have a lot of willpower. They can force themselves into the gym. They can force themselves through the pain, but they don't have a lot of won't power. So I won't train today. I use Charlie Francis's 1 to 3% rule. If you can't improve on your last workout by 1 to 3%, you don't belong in the gym. You should be stretching, mobilizing, meditating, working in, resting, making love, walking with your kids.
Do you know how hard that's been for me to make those transitions, especially as I've purposely said, I'm going to walk away from this. I push myself to the absolute limits and to the point, I could have killed myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much harder for me to switch and not do that. And I have, for the last year, I have not lifted. I just started deadlifting again for 2.5 years break. And so I'm doing some sets of 8 or 10 once a week, but that's the first time in a year I've really been handling any weight above my body weight. Right.
I got to get you into the rocks. That's a whole new deal.
I'll have to check it out.
Believe me, it takes what we think of as weightlifting to a whole new level of, I can get killed out here. I got to be very present.
But now it's like, hey, I don't feel great. I don't want to train today. I'm like, well, maybe I'll just go do some BFR on the bike for 5 minutes, maybe 2 sessions, or I'm going to go chill in the sauna when I'm stressed out. I may actually even do that instead of working.
That's healthy.
So these are things I'm continually trying to practice because I know my nature, but I went so high. There's no up that you can really go from where I went. And so what is the point? And so I pushed myself to that point so that, now is a shift. I train 4 days a week, maybe 5 days a week, 30, 40, maybe 50-minute sessions, body weight or less, short, intense, get my metabolic effect. So there's no extra metabolic training that I needed. That is it. And so that's a big shift for me. And I want to walk away from every workout. I worked out this morning before this podcast, feeling energized and feeling ready for the day, not depleted. Right.
That's the style I adopted as well after years and years of doing the same thing, trying to demonstrate to people that the teachings that I have developed produce legitimate strength. And so when you get caught in building the identity, if you don't identify the point at which the identity is now solidified, and pushing it further actually becomes detrimental to your health and to your capacity to let your soul guide you into the rest of your wholeness, then you can get stuck in a midlife crisis. And there it is.
Yeah, 100%. So that's exactly like I've walked the walk. I've shown exactly what I wanted to do. And it's a time for a shift for me. And the thing is, I have enough resilience to last a lifetime. I have enough bone density to last my life. I have
I'm sure you do.
I do. I've done the imaging.
You could probably sell some bone.
Yeah. I mean, like, we understand the mechanisms of how that works. Some people I found out, don't actually realize that, like, loading the body increases bone density. Like,
Yeah.
strength, like, anyway.
I'm an alchemist, and I developed an entire system of alchemy. And everything we've been discussing so far of the expression of Chris is the fire element. So the do work through the pain is the fire element, the action element. The fire makes shit happen, right? It makes things go. Inside your engine is explosions, lots of them. And water is what controls fire. So if we don't have access to our feminine, our cooling capacity, the capacity to use the brake pedal. See, that's the won't power. I used to be a race car driver, and it takes a lot of skill to learn how to use a brake just enough to make a corner without wiping out. If you're too heavy on the fire, you're never going to be successful. If you're too heavy on the brake, you're always in the back of the pack.
Exactly.
So the balance between will and won't power takes a lot of us, especially with these intense upbringings, quite a while to learn how to bring the water element in. And if you're too alpha male, then you have this unconscious fear of being perceived by your peers and your tribe as weak if you express emotion or you say, I'm tired, I'm not going to train today. So it actually takes quite a transition of especially the male ego. And today I've worked with countless numbers of elite female athletes that are heavily masculinized, and they're having the same problems that guys do. But without those core values, you don't know where to step on the brake. You have no guiding structure.
And that's something anybody that follows my social media, I know I get consistent feedback on, is the openness. Am I willing to talk about those issues, to be able to cry on camera, to be able to, like, people really, they like someone that is in the, like that. So many people that are social media personalities, influencers, whatever you want, always want to create this perfect image, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, there's a video I shot like 2 months ago where it's called, it's kind of a bit of a poem, but it's called Unkempt. And I'm like, this is me. My hair's all over the place. I've got ADHD. Like, you watch my videos online, you see I'm like, I just am what I am, and I don't try to dress up and be anything else, right?
That's being home, baby. That's home.
And you know, after I did my 1,000-pound squat, you could see me crying right after I finished the lift. But I filmed another video later that day talking about my feelings and that I had from the responses that I was getting. I was just bawling, like, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with putting that out there because that is me. And so, but that's not something that is easy for people to do, right?
No, and it's also, as you probably are aware, if you were to be in, say, Louis Simmons' gym and you cried, they might actually have a hard time being present with you because it would shock them and scare them. When you get too identified with strength, power, speed, and masculinity, there's actually a fear of the feminine. And that fear actually leads us to not having any mechanism of controlling the fire that once served us, but now is eating us from the inside out.
And this was a big change for me in my work environment. So we're going back to 2014 again. imagine the high powered executive guy. You've got to face a front this like, I was never an asshole or that. Like, I've had people follow me my whole career. People work for me for like 2 decades, follow me from one job to the next. I've always treated people well, but there's still like this almost robot mentality where when people come to you, they know exactly how you're going to respond. Emotions are going to be shown. And I needed a different environment. I had to create this environment where in my workplace, I could be me. I could wear myself on my sleeve. And I had to build that. And it's not uncommon for me to sit down and cry with an employee to like, these are, like I said, I've got mental issues. I've had a lot of trauma in my life, but I also have biological too. Like I've got pretty severe bipolar, and I've got big ups and downs, and trying to like manage that in that prior corporate world was incredibly taxing and demanding when I didn't have the opportunity where I'm open with this with my team and be like, hey, this is, I'm going to present myself in different fashions. And if I'm not okay to be here, I'm not going to be here.
Yeah.
When I'm on my peak and my high, yep, that's where all the crazy designs and ideas and the things that move the business forward. And then there's going to be the other times. And this is where I'm at. And man, that has been so different. I can't, and it's
healthy different.
It is healthy for me. Like I had to be there. I couldn't sustain that type mentality. And it's like that was the same person that was, trying to set the world records and do all this. And it's like, I'm done proving myself to others. People are going to say my lifts are, fake or legit, not legit because they're not to a standard and to a judge, in a meet. I'm like, I don't care anymore. I want to do what makes me happy and present myself and chase the things that I want to. I've done that. I've been there and I'm moving on. And so I did it in a lot of different aspects, but creating the work environment for me to be able to be me, and then moving it still wasn't as much in social media, right? So that's been more in the last couple of years where I've shifted more to this is it. We can have some of those hard, deep conversations. We can feel those sorts of things. And it's, it just is.
Yeah. It's actually beautiful. I mean, I really see from not only from looking through your book and listening to your story of your life that you're really coming into your fullness. You're finding that you don't always have to push things to the limit to be alive and to validate yourself, and that you can express your emotion and allow that to be okay.
My wife says I have all the feels.
Yeah. So the thing there is that's really what wholeness is about. And for a lot of people, it's scary. For a lot of men, it's scary. And I know for me, it was a crisis. When I went through my midlife crisis, it happened the pretty much right when I turned 50. It hit me like a ton of bricks. But when my second wife, Angie, got pregnant with my little boy, Mana, who's 5 now, his being in the womb opened my heart chakra so much that just emotion was moving through me. And I'd be watching a television and there'd be some emotional soupy thing that normally I would just like let it fly. And all of a sudden I'm crying my eyes out and I'm like, oh my God.
Like the most like totally not realistic movies, like they'll still hit me. Like I'll cry to cartoons sometimes. Like it's just like, I'm like, it hits my feels so much. And my wife laughs at me, but that's just the way I am. And yeah, but the big thing that's helped me with that transition is the impact it has on people.
Yeah. Well, it shows them you can be real.
I've had so many people, reach out and say, you saved me from committing suicide. You have, you have done like so many different messages, emails, people trying to get through hold of me through customer service and so on, of the impact it's had on their lives. The book, the things like me just being present and being out there and allowing and sharing the struggles that I've had and the stories. it is, you take a lot of crap for it online, and I just ignore that because it's you can get a million of that, and then you get this one message from somebody and the impact that it has changed their life. And it's like, this is why I do what I do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I've been fortunate enough to have enough of that kind of positive feedback that when it's tough going, that it keeps the wind in my sails, without that realization that we're really touching people's lives. And I think ultimately one of the most important ways that we make meaning in ourselves is when our life is actually supporting other people in creating more of what they want, or healing, or growing, because then we sort of, our soul reaches into the soul of the other. And by doing that, we actually add the best parts of ourselves to somebody else, because we've already filtered through all the toxins and all the poisons and all the challenges. So we can give them the inspiration and the motivation and the courage that they can make it through it, because we've already made it through the fire. So we can say, look, you can get through this because I know you can get through it.
Hi, everybody. Do you guys want to know one of my secret weapons that helps me avoid being sick or feeling run down? It's Organifi Immunity. Organifi Immunity is a super high quality, certified organic drink mix that provides daily immune support and supports overall immunity. Organifi Immunity contains whole food vitamins C and D, whole food zinc, mushroom beta-glycans, and provides only natural sweetness. Not only will you support your immune system, but you'll also get on-the-go superfoods in a delicious orange blend that is great for you and your kids, and everyone will love it. My family and I love it, and it's easy as tearing off the top of the package and mixing it with high-quality drinking water, and you can rest a little easier knowing that you're enhancing your immune system, which is probably a good idea now that so many people are spending so much time indoors, breathing indoor air, and lacking sun exposure. Why not enjoy a little immune insurance while getting certified organic nutrients, superfoods, and great taste that's quick, easy, and effective? To get your Organifi Immunity and shop their amazing product line with your Living 4D discount, and save 20% on any and all of their products using the code CHEK20 during checkout. Enjoy Organifi.
The next thing I wanted to ask you about is that in my long career of working with strength athletes and athletes of all types, I found over and over again that their pursuits of physical size, strength, power are often compensations for feelings of insecurity that they have, and often as a result of painful development experiences, as we've been talking about it. I'd love it if you could share some of the indicators that an individual may be pursuing size, strength, and power for the wrong reasons, and what the consequences are of developing physical strength at the expense of emotional, mental, and spiritual strength.
Yes. So I think I'm going to cover that maybe in some broad general guidelines and then give some examples. So I think if you look at it and realize that anything, if you're chasing it for anything that is an external factor, that you're probably in the wrong direction, versus internal self-development, understanding your limitations, as your time for yourself meditatively, so many different avenues, internal versus external, developing resilience versus. So some examples would be the simple fact that lifting weights is never going to affect the quality of being able to find a mate and having them stay with you, your friends, your work environment. It's not going to make you more popular. It's not going to do these things that often how a lot of people get started in this world, right?
Yes.
You're not going to be looked up to in any greater manner or have more respect around you in any manner that matters, right? So it effectively, those are the things that you've got to understand, because if you're chasing that, we end up with a lot of people like in this ego mentality. I'm going to war. I'm going to battle. I'm going to this warrior, and it's like, no, we're just lifting weights. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, when I walk up to a big max, a squat or deadlift, I'm going to put my mental state maybe in that for that, brief 10, 20, 30 seconds while I try to, imagine
Overcome
that
the resistance.
that I'm overcome. But you need to walk away from that, because if you don't, that's going to actually impact all those things in the rest of your life, because you're going to walk out and still be this perception, which people are going to see right through. They're going to see this front, it could be narcissism, it could be ego, it could be any of this. And it's so in your face to other people when you have that, and you're going to create more of that. Right. So your insecurities just become more visible to everybody around, instead of this shield, this physical force, that you're trying to develop this to be able to be to a point where nothing can hurt you, nothing can damage you, emotionally, or where that's just not reality. Big muscles are not going to protect you from any of those things that have hurt you in life, other than the resilience to be able to withstand the physical challenges and things that may come at you, which includes age, or being in a bicycle accident, or, there's value in it. 100%. Right. But it's not going to protect you from those other things. It's not going to protect you from, kids laughing at you and making fun of you in grade school, or not making it on the team, or whatever those reasons are. It's not going to take that away or make it you stronger to withstand that. Walking around the inflated lat, it's like the inflated lat syndrome, that like people can see that. And when you lift weights for that reason, you may be bigger and not like, actually pretending you got lats and walking around, but it's just like that. People are going to see that, and it's actually going to create more issues with those root issues, whether it's somebody not loving you and your ability to hold and maintain a relationship, right? Because you're going to fall back on, well, I'm just going to go back to the gym and get bigger and hotter and better looking and get a better person than the person that dumped me. Like, right. No, they did not dump you because your biceps were small.
No.
Right. So, it was some other reason. And so we never addressed that. And we actually, and we forcibly turn and look the other direction. So this external versus internal. So, like, and no judgment, like if you're in that space, that's fine. Like, hey, I, like many people, started lifting weights as a teen because I was like, oh, it's going to attract girls. And at the time, I had no self-confidence. I, was walking around with dirt, you can imagine, the picturesque of what I looked like. And I'm like, this is going to open up those avenues. Yeah. That's why I was lifting weights at 12, 13, 14 years old. Like, it's going to have an impact on this stuff. Right. Well, no, it doesn't. Right.
It does give you more confidence in yourself.
It does, but that's internal. That's internal. And that's actually,
yes.
So we do charity work for Special Olympics. So we train the teams, we put on competitions. We want some of the fundraising been done for Special Olympics, because there is really, you get so many people, like this cheerleading mentality that we have in the world today, all rah, all positive, work environment, school, all this sort of stuff. And again, that environment, they know if somebody's, tooting up their horn, versus I went and I've been doing this program and I know I made progress. Nobody has to tell me. And that has such a huge impact. Watching Special Olympians get involved with strength training, I have never seen anything have a broader impact on their mental and emotional well-being, their self-confidence, than actually lifting weights. Because it's not, I'm bigger, I'm stronger. It's the fact that I put effort into something and I realized a result, right? And that is what builds confidence. Winning, like overcoming challenges and immovable things that in the world, that builds confidence. And that is one, and no one can take that away. Nobody could say, oh, that was make believe.
It increases freedom for people with limitations as well.
Oh my God. That's the physical resilience, right?
Yeah. it's also important for their psychological health, because being, in a wheelchair or having a disease that limits you, it really is hard, because you look at your friends, your family, and everybody else is doing a lot of the things you wish you could do.
Mm-hmm.
But as you get stronger and all of a sudden you can get yourself up off the toilet to wipe your own bottom, and maybe that's been a real issue for you. And now you have the freedom of not having to call somebody to help wipe your butt every time. For most of us, we don't really realize how big of a step that can be in somebody's life. It can completely be a state shift for them. Like, wow, I've really got something here. And that's what inspires more commitment to the process of developing what I would call functional strength.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we do a lot of work there because it's, like I said, it's transformative watching that happen, and that happens to everyone. It's much more relevant and visible with working with those individuals.
Right. Chris, what are some indicators that there's underlying issues that could enhance an individual's pursuit of healthy strength if they were effectively healed? In other words, having worked with lots of athletes yourself and people, surely you've come across instances where you can see, if this person would just address X or do more of Y, they would actually be able to be more effective in their pursuit of strength or athletic conditioning.
No, well, one of those is ability to hold and manage positions. So we see that quite a bit with the ability to be able to buffer against loads and demands and be able to own positions. So to be able to elicit force throughout the entire range of motion. So I'm talking about athletes that come in like, hey, we've got a lot of skill, we've got a lot of mobility, and that is the opportunity when we're able to actually add strength to those components. So like Major League Baseball, for example, they get a bunch of highly skilled people from the Dominican Republic.
Yes.
And their opportunity there is simply being able to add strength to that skill, right? Now you're also going to, you may not realize it, but you're going to reduce their injury rate, right? Because we're more resilient to be able to withstand frequency and loading, within the game itself. So those are the huge pieces that are going to come into play. And a lot of people don't realize that strength is the ability to be able to buffer and be more resilient to those other demands and things that are going to come at you. You can handle it more frequently. You can handle higher loads. You're going to adapt to it in a positive manner where you're going to be, a stronger, better version.
Yeah, I'm actually, I think maybe I didn't state the question as well as I could have. I'm referring to, for example, when I was a competitive fighter and trainer of the Army boxing team, we had one guy in particular who actually made it to the Olympics. And you might remember in the 1988 Olympics, Anthony Hembrick was the guy that became famous for missing the bus to the final fight for the gold medal. Well, I was actually his trainer. And this guy would not condition. He would do everything he could do to get out of any of our conditioning work, which you couldn't do. It was a military boxing team, and we have coaches that are master sergeants, and if they can't control you by a coach, then they use their military might. But he would never put any effort into anything. He had so much natural talent. And I said to him multiple times, I said, Hembrick, you're going to step into the ring one day with someone who's just as skilled as you, but in a lot better shape, and you're going to get your ass kicked because you're lazy. So what I'm really saying is, what are some of the things that you see in strength athletes or people that are pursuing strength if they had more of a certain quality or awareness that it would enhance their ability to be more consistent and more productive in their athletic training or strength development, such as discipline is one of them?
Well, from just a straight like strength concept, right? There's a lot in that pure strength world where we get, a wrong step back on a squat, a little bit of a misload on a bar because we're so strong in that one plane, but we're we're lacking in the transverse and the rotational planes.
Yeah.
And so we're so strong, but so weak at the same time, because we're in this expectation. Everything is perfectly balanced, perfectly loaded in, and one little minute piece out of that, and we're huge. So one of the things I like to do is simple drills, like being on a belt squat and marching, sitting there one step over, back and forth between those. The shoulder rock swing, it was the first product I brought to the market. This, you're doing rotational, you're working the shoulder while we've got the core, engaged, and then working that shoulder through its entire range of motion, while also integrating that rotational movement in there. These are things I call the anti-fragile. It's anti-fragile type training. We need to not just be in this, I'm so strong in these very distinct planes of movement,
right?
But how they interact with other, because that's where we get damaged. It's like it's like the roads. It's like the road cyclist or mountain biker that goes, I don't need to do strength training. And then they crash and their whole shoulder gets ripped off and their career's over. Those are the opportunities, right? And so specifically for strength athletes, I see that as a huge gap. We also see obviously the gap in the conditioning front, just the ability to be able to have a realization that if we're improve our work capacity, we have the opportunity to be able to load more frequently, right? And be able to recover from those sessions. We can start looking at some of these things in different manners. Anyway, those are a couple like big examples that are easy to point out.
I'm curious, how do you handle the issue of drug use or steroid use with athletes? What do you do to a young athlete comes to you and says, maybe he's a football player and says, I want to do steroids, ... The whole team's doing it, whatever. Because I've been down this road many times with athletes. I'm just curious, how do you make the differentiation of this is an effective choice for your career versus it's not an effective choice?
Usually those are very, personal one-on-one conversations, and I will share with them my experiences. And, I started using steroids at 33 years old. I'd already had an 800-pound deadlift as a 198-pound lifter. And now I don't use them other than a very small maintenance dose of TRT because of the damage that I've done. But I explicitly say, that I do not believe that people should use them because of the negative consequences.
Yeah.
And I'll detail what those consequences are and say, hey, I wish I had known this, but this is where it's at. These are the things that result of it. But if you choose to do that, understand that this is a lifelong commitment that you do not get to walk away from. You're going to have to deal with the ramifications. You're going to have to do the research. You're going to have to know the right people. And you're going to have to, again, just like me, I have to deal with that. Even though I'm not there to a certain level, I'm still having to use for the rest of my life because of the impact on that, and deal with the issues as a result of it, because they come with it. So there's and be very clear that I don't believe that there's any reason to do that unless specifically this is like your career, your livelihood, like things are dependent on it. There's absolutely no reason for 99.9% of people to go that route. And that's unfortunately most of the people that are using steroids have, right. They're never like, it's some 150-pound, kid at 24-hour fitness that is the one that's using, right?
Yeah.
And which is just ridiculous, because now they've affected the rest of their life and they don't know that. And now they're going to be in their 30s and dealing with, they're going to be married, going to be at a different point. They're like, why do I have so much fat gain? Why am I, not motivated to have sex with my wife? Why can't I get her pregnant? Why I have lethargy and inability to focus on my work environment? Like, it's affecting my job. It's affecting my relationship. It's affecting all aspects of my life. Right. because they ran a couple cycles when they were 18 to 21. And what'd that do for them? It made them look good for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
So I'm very open. But at the same time, yes, I have used steroids. I deadlifted and squatted 1,000 pounds. If you think that someone accomplishes that without some additional enhancement, I would say take your blinders off and realize that at that level, that is part of that game. Would I be there or not? I don't know if I had all the information that I did, but on waiting until I was 33 with 20 years of training experience under my belt is probably in the smaller end of the category, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
To push and realize the full maximal of like what I was capable of. I would, as a natural athlete getting towards the mid 30s, having trained for over 20 years, I waited that long because I knew, hey, I want to see what that potential is. And then I was doing it as I was starting to enter a phase of my life where this was my career, my income, my ability to care for my family, all these things were associated at some level with this at that point in time as well.
Years ago, because I've had to work with not only strength athletes doing steroids or coming to me and asking what I think about it and all this kind of stuff, but a lot of young people. I've actually had two cases where one 18-year-old and one 19-year-old got a hold of me and asked how to get off of Viagra. I'm like, Jesus Christ, your dick should be like a dinner bell at that age.
Exactly. Like you don't need, and you definitely, oh my God, this like doing steroids at that age is like kind of stupid. Like even if you choose to do them in your life, like that just makes no sense either. But Viagra, like, what are you doing?
Well, the point is these young people are so burnt out. They're already 60 when they're 18.
That's true.
They're trying to cheat the system all the time. And now they're paying the price at an early age. But when I was confronting all this, I started doing some research and I found a research paper that had some very interesting statistics. Now, this is probably 14, 15 years ago, but it's still the same issues today. The research paper showed that they surveyed Pop Warner football coaches and teams, which is like age 13, and they found that 13% of all Pop Warner football players were on steroids. And when investigated and asked how did they get started, about 95% of the time it was dad or big brother putting them on the steroids because mom and dad's dream was they would become a professional football player.
One of my friends, I could probably say his name, and you know who it is because he talks about this openly. He's around my age. He's a very well-known individual in the strength training world, priorly as an athlete, but he owns a company. He went on at 13.
Wow.
Because of his dad to play football. And he's been on ever since. He's getting close to 50 now. But 13 years on, like from his father, like that just is crazy.
I just asked and because one, you're an elite strength athlete, you've lived the life, and you're at a point now where any young man listening to this can hear it from someone who's got the credibility to say, be careful about that decision because it's a life-changing decision, and that's why I asked it for you.
I did it after 20 years of training as an 800-pound deadlifter, approaching my mid-30s as an athlete where it was going to affect like my income, my ability to care for my family, all those sorts of things. But I do not recommend the use of steroids. Like, know what you're getting into because it is not you are not going to run a cycle or two. This is a choice you're making for the rest of your life. And I'm okay with where I'm at and what I've done. Like, I live by my choices. Like, this is, I don't get to second guess and go, well, I wish. That's why I said I don't have an answer of what would happen because this is where I'm at. And I have enjoyed my life and I've accomplished some crazy things but it's not all as a result of that, but that's been there.
It's also very expensive, and a lot of people don't realize that to maintain that is not cheap.
Especially if you've got to be able to mitigate the issues that come with it, because there's so many You've got to run blood work constantly. You've got to take a whole lot of herbal support supplements, and it adds up. You've got to have regular consultations with a doctor if you're going to do this right. If you're going to do this, you need to do these things. You do not do this in a blind. And it blows me away how many strength athletes out there just use and have never like done baseline blood work and continue to like, how can you know what's safe and what isn't based on your body? Everybody's going to respond a little differently. And your body may not take something, and your liver values could go through the roof, and you could be looking at a liver cancer or liver failure or something like that, because you're not looking at this stuff. And you need to know, like, oh my God, my HDL is dropping in the tank, like right away. Like, you need to do something about this. And then it doesn't go away. You're going to have some level of ramifications of that ongoing from then. That's the reality of things.
Yeah. One of my friends is he's Russian. I've worked all over the world, so I have friends all over the world, but he was, he set a world record in Olympic weightlifting. He was on the Russian Olympic weightlifting team, but he told me that when the young guys are coming up and competing in Russia in strength sports, that most of them have to go to work for the mafia, because if they don't get on the steroids, they can't compete with the guys that are on it. So he said almost everybody he trained with to try to get onto an Olympic team was not only having to use steroids, but they were having to work for the mafia. So he'd go from training all day to working at night doing shit that turned him into a Christian because he's still trying to figure out how to heal it. So, I'm sharing these things so people understand the underbelly of this. Steroids are not cheap, and it's a big decision to make. And then people end up having to do things. And we kind of got to the point now where people justify it by saying, well, everybody else is doing it, I've got to do it. And I can see, if you're born in Russia where everybody, a lot of people are on poverty level, and you see it as your only ticket out, I personally probably would have done the steroids. But for our culture, like we talked about with young kids doing steroids, getting their dads and their brothers giving to them, that's
for what? Like,
it's just not the right part. It's not the right avenue. And I think a lot of it's just a lack of education. People think it's kind of like a magic trick. You take this shot and all of a sudden you're strong as hell, and they don't realize there's real consequences with it.
Trust me, you're not going to, anybody that's listening, you could use as much steroids as you want. You will never squat and deadlift 1,000 pounds.
Not unless you do the training and you have the skill.
There's a whole lot. There's
some genes in there too. You got to have the right genes.
There's a whole lot of other pieces in there, right?
Yes.
So, it's not gonna, because again, for most people, you're still going to be the 150 pound, kid at 24 hour.
Yeah. Turmeric's really, really hot now. There's a lot of scientific research on it, but they're not all created the same. So I brought Autumn Smith on to tell you about Paleo Valley's turmeric complex, so you know exactly what the benefits are and why you, like me, should get your turmeric complex from Paleo Valley. Autumn, tell us about your turmeric complex.
At Paleo Valley, we are big believers in food as medicine. And so turmeric, of course, it has beat drugs out. We know it's anti-inflammatory. We know it has brain benefits. We know it has joint benefits. But what most people don't know is that a lot of turmeric supplements only contain one isolated compound of turmeric called curcumin. And so what we did instead was create a complex. We added organic turmeric and then ginger and rosemary and clove, which were some of the most DNA protective spices studied. And we created a complex. We added organic coconut powder and pepper for absorption. And so we've created a really high quality, highly bioavailable turmeric complex that will hopefully help you to feel your best. And all you have to do to check it out is go to paleovalley.com, and you can use the code Chek15 to save 15%.
How would you define strength from your perspective? Now, most people think of strength as, I can lift something heavy. But there's much more to strength than that. I'm curious, how would you define strength in its fullness?
I really like to use the word resilience.
Mm-hmm.
It is it is much more encompassing in my manner, because that it's making you more resilient to be able to take on the additional demands, loads, challenges, stress, things that are going to come at you in the future, right?
Yeah.
Or in the current. But it's a development of resilience. So there's a great analogy I like to use, and this is about trees in the biodome. They grow to a certain height, and then they fall over.
Oh, wow.
And they couldn't figure it out for the longest time. Didn't matter what kind of tree.
No
They
wind.
grow, they hit a certain height, and they fall over. Because there was no wind, they finally figured out, that told the tree, grow strong roots, dig deep and wide into the ground, create the bark needs to be stiff to withstand the elements. And so the tree literally kills itself because of its lack of ability to
deal with gravity,
become resilient. Right. And so that's what that really, to me, defines what strength is, to be able to take a demand, respond, and have that become you're a stronger and better, more resilient version of yourself. The next thing in life, it doesn't matter whether it's losing a job, losing a loved one, again, crashing a bike. So we're talking about mental, emotional, all of it is the same thing. It's our ability, because if we don't challenge ourselves in those manner, we don't grow. This is the simple fact. Human physiology as general, if you walk into the gym and you do some curls, your arm's going to become more resilient. It's going to get stronger. The bone's going to get denser. If you break your arm and put a cast on, the process of atrophy starts. The process of death and decay, right? So literally, if we don't have those stresses and demands in our life, and I like to articulate it in that manner, because so many people also I need to find a conflict-free life. I need to remove all, those things from my life. And guess what? You actually need that strife and demand at some level. We need to have enough. We need to have enough so that we actually recover from it, right? So if we do daily doubles of CrossFit, 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're going to, deplete yourself. So we have to have a stimulus, and we have to have the raw materials as well. So just like if you take somebody on a starvation diet and you have them do curls, they're not going to grow stronger bones.
No,
okay?
They won't respond well.
You could take somebody with a massive amount of calcium and protein, and they're not going to and have them go into space. What happens?
They lose it.
They lose it. So we have to have two things. We have to have a stimulus for action, and we have to have the raw materials. And from that, we become more resilient. And it's all aspects. Like I said, it's not saying burn the candle at both ends, because that is not the message, because it's a balance of both. Actually, let me read a quote from Hippocrates, basically the founder of modern medicine.
Of course, I know all about him.
Yeah, so I figured you did. But this is one of the most simplest, profound statements that people kind of miss. And he was a big believer that, that health is created through vitality, through strength. And so his definition is, he says, if we could give every individual the right amount of nourishment and exercise, not too little, not too much, we would have the safest way to health.
Yes.
That is it. We have to have some demand and then some rest, but not too much. Or too long. So if that window goes too far, we have to load and add stress again. So you got to have a recovery window, but then we need to reload, because if we don't, we're going to lose the adaptations and not build to the next level, right?
We need the wind.
We need the wind, or we die.
Hans Selye, who is one of the pioneering stress researchers, he basically classified terms to distinguish stress types. So he had eustress, which was useful stress, and distress, which was destructive stress.
Yeah.
So I think a healthy engaging of athletics, whether it be weightlifting, sports, whatever, gives us a chance to expose ourselves to useful stress and dealing with the challenges of relationships and money and the issues of the world, as long as we have an adequate system for recovering, whether it be physically,
Exactly.
emotionally, or mentally, then the stress is useful because the wind keeps blowing. But if you're doing nothing but hurricanes all the time and you're inducing them on yourself, then you create distress. And so you stay catabolic, which is, as you know, tissue destructive. So you just keep breaking. And next thing you know, you can't figure out why you're so tired all the time, but you don't realize you're giving yourself too much distress.
Exactly. And that's like the foundational principles around the equipment that I design, right? Is I want to be able to get joints in the right position. If we have a joint in the wrong position, we're putting loads on tissue and bones and putting things out of position, so we don't have the right length tension relationship between, the balancing muscles. And we have imposed stress that we can't adapt to. Right. And so why are we doing that? Why are we getting ourselves shoved into this same equipment over and over? Like we're all built a little differently, and we want to shove everybody through the same box instead of having things that actually accommodate for the variability in lever lengths, mobility restrictions, and overall training demands and needs.
It's funny that you mentioned, I can't remember what you said happened in 1988.
That's when I started training.
Right. That's the year I started lecturing, traveling the world professionally, teaching people why the machines they were using didn't work and weren't designed based on human biomechanics and what functional training was, and showed them the hard science behind it, and ultimately got kicked out of 2 major conferences because the sponsors of the conferences said, every time that guy lectures, nobody buys anything. So if you let him lecture anymore, we're not going to sponsor you.
Yeah. My company, Barefoot Athletics, like I have so many people that think me saying, hey, you should spend a little bit of time strengthening your foot and not wearing a shoe. They're like, you're an anti-vaxxer. Shoes are science. And I'm like,
bullshit.
Bullshit.
They're bad science.
They're bad science. And guess who's in the schools? The orthotics companies are actually teaching when the data does not support it. It's clear.
It doesn't.
Meta-analysis of research on orthotics shows that it does nothing more than a temporary pain relief, just like putting a back brace on, right? What does putting on a back brace do if you did that all day, every day? Wake up in the morning, roll out of bed, put your brace on, and don't take it off until you get home at night. You're going to do the opposite of what we want to have happen. We actually need to train and teach that tissue how to move and become. Somehow we get in this mind like we train everything in the body, but we're just going to neglect this one area because science fixed it.
So, yeah.
Science has fixed it with shoes. I'm like, no.
Science is a double-edged sword. It's made our lives beautiful in many ways, but almost every single thing that's destroying our culture has been validated by science. Every drug that's had to been taken off the market because it killed thousands of people was first validated by science. And the problem with science is a lot of the science is done by people, especially in the field of strength and conditioning, who have degrees in biomechanics, but they studied fixed stick figures drawn in books, and they don't actually engage the athletic activity they're studying, so they don't really realize the gap between intellectual understanding and physiological experience.
I speak to this a lot. Like, you don't want to just go to the person that's just a lifter, just the doer, but you need the person that is highly educated, doing the research, but also is doing the doing. And that's why I believe in walking the walk. I have done everything. Like I went, the primary basis for my education is ability to manage and control spinal mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, to me, the number one global. It has the largest global impact on the physical body. And we can't go into the shoulder or into the knee or any of these things unless we've taken care of that first. Second area is the foot. It's the second largest global impact. Anyway, that's why I went from somebody that earlier in their life herniated my disc, had to learn to walk again to be able to squat and deadlift 1,000 pounds for reps with zero pain. And that shows, like, to me, like, this is how far you can take the concepts if you have the understanding of how to put this stuff in place. That it doesn't have to be this, I'm the person with a bad back. I'm the person that's always going to be in pain. But it's back to my point. You need somebody that has been in it and knows. You can't.
Yes, you do.
You can't know. You don't know what you don't know. I mean, that's a really common statement. But you can't just be that and not be doing. Like I said, I talked about all the continuing ed and the people that I network and ask questions and work. Like you have to have both of those to really find the beauty.
Yeah. Have you ever seen my Chek totem pole?
I have.
Yeah, because that basically goes through how the system is organized in a control hierarchy, and it shows which systems control which systems. And ultimately what it shows is that the core is guiding the movement of the extremities, and the head, neck, and jaw complex is part of the core system. So the spinal axis is what's controlling everything. So I was just curious if you'd seen that, because I've got a YouTube video that gives a kind of a simple explanation of it. It's really quite deep in
I'll go
level
refresh
3
myself.
training.
I know I've seen it, but I would not be able to. It's been a while, and I would not be able to go through and
I think you'd find
detail
it-
any of it. So I'm going to go check it out. Yeah.
I've got 1 or 2 videos that give a kind of a brief overview, but I think you'll find it fascinating because it's going to validate everything you've been saying.
I've got a pretty systematic approach for assessment, correction, and that's anybody. And I find it doesn't matter. This isn't for people that squat heavy weights. Like, it's human. People miss the point. It's like, this is a marathon runner. It's the list goes on. Like, it's human physiology as a whole. Like,
yes, and another point on that is that people don't understand something about resistance. One of the questions I ask my students, which 99.999% of them get wrong, I say, if I'm doing a max deadlift at 500 pounds and my grandmother is doing a max deadlift at 35 pounds, which one of us is working harder? Every one of them says you are. I say, no, we're both at 100%.
mm-hmm.
We're both working as hard as we can work. We're at maximum intensity. So that's a very important thing for a lot of personal trainers to get through their head, because they think, oh, you've only got 60 pounds on the bar. You're a pussy. You're not even trying. But they don't realize that 60 pounds may be 95% of that person's lifting capacity. And so they keep trying to push people too far. And that's how truckloads of people get injured.
But the same exact principles and process that I put in place to deadlift 1,000 pounds is going to be the same thing with a 75-year-old grandmother that's never touched a weight in her life, that comes in and has a back pain and can't pick up her recent grandchild that just got born, right? And you're going to walk through the same stuff, and in 20 and 30 minutes, she's going to go from a 7 on the pain scale down to a 2.
Yeah.
Be able to pick up that 30-pound kettlebell off the floor and have tears running down her face, not from pain, but from joy, because you just gave her control.
Yeah, you gave her more freedom again.
Yep.
Who's the strongest person you've ever met when it comes to being strong for the right reasons?
Ooh. Well, that has to go to my mom.
That's great. I love it.
I mean, she has chosen to live life on her terms, and it has not been easy. And she has faced so much to live the way that she has wanted to do and overcome what the things that have happened over the course of her life. And this is why I am who I am. She taught me
amazing.
everything I need to know about strength and resilience for the most part.
I think I have to share that with you. My mother, she can be quite cantankerous at times, but I'll tell you what, she's walked through the fires of hell many times. And I'll tell you an interesting story.
I love me a strong woman.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got 2 of them. I'm married to 2 at once, and they make my life special. The one of the people that I always respected as a young man was Jack LaLanne, because he really used his strength to help people.
So you asked me in your primer yesterday to list people that I looked up to, and Jack LaLanne was was one of those. The big thing for me too was a lot of people think about him as, the person that was on TV, but I really love, and this will make sense, like the creativity that he had in showing what that means and what it can do for you and the things that you can accomplish, and the feats of strength that he did later in his life, in his 60s and 70s, and the creativity around is just, to me, that's what it's really cool. And you can obviously see some aspect. I mean, what he did was just crazy.
Yeah. And, speaking of mothers, when my first son was born, I had just turned 18 2 weeks earlier, but I was there with my wife through the whole, unfortunately for her, 72 hours of very intense labor. And to see, now I have 3 kids, so I've been through it 3 times with them, but to see the strength a woman has to have to give birth naturally, it is unfreaking believable.
It is. It
is wild. And one of the first true deep spiritual experience I had is as my son's head came out of his mother's vagina, something happened inside me and I was blown into the universe. I was completely, utterly in a state of unity with the universe, looking at this child coming out of my wife's vagina womb.
I could barely see my son because I had so much my face.
Yeah.
I just such an experience. Oh my God.
Yeah. Have you studied Eugene Sandow's philosophy of strength and development?
It's been a long time. So I believe he did a lot of isometric holds, but I'm not.
He did all sorts of stuff.
But I know a lot of the feats that he did, but the training philosophy, not as much. But his mentor, Professor Attila, I know quite a bit more about, just because you think about building these training centers that Attila did, which is where Sandow got his start. And like that ties, because that's like what I do, right? Is like bringing something in the world, in this physical realm, that people in the physical training realm, that everybody it's so different than what's out there in the world, like right now. And so rethinking, reimagining, and trying to build a whole comprehensive system is what inspires me about Attila. But the Sandow philosophies, I'd have to refresh myself on.
If you don't have it, it's hard to find, but it's worth the search. Get his book, Life is Movement. It's about close to 300 pages. It's loaded with great stuff. For example, in there, Sandow says, no man can achieve optimal strength until all his organs are healthy. And that is the truth.
I've read a few different pieces from some, not Sandow, but physical culturists around the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the stuff we're talking about, like breathing and some of this basic, is like, it was lost and not had any level of importance, when it's like literally foundational. And it's really interesting reading these texts from 100 plus years ago.
Yes.
And really seeing tremendous nuggets of information that we're going, oh, hey, science is telling us that now. Right. And so like that statement that you're talking about right there, like that's exactly 100% type of the stuff that I've read in some other texts from that same time period.
That book was written in 1926. I've read all of his books, studied, I think, 2 biographies on him, but I didn't study him as much because of how strong he was. That was certainly important to me, but what was really important to me and inspired me to read all of his books was his holistic nature and how much of a master of the science of training. But, Sandow could do a single arm clean and press with a 301-pound dumbbell. You can actually, last time, it's been years since I looked, but you actually could go on Google. If you search Eugene Sandow, then I think they have a video option. There's videos of him doing backflips repeatedly on stage with a 50-pound dumbbell in each hand. Now, I've worked with a lot of elite gymnasts, and none of them can even come close to doing that.
No, I got a friend that does it with 30s, and that's
Yes.
that's impressive as can be.
Yeah, Sandai was using 25 kg dumbbells. So that's 2.2 times 25. I can't remember what that is. It's what is that? It's like 56 pounds or something like that.
Yep, right around there. Yeah, it's 2.2046 and comes out to almost exactly 55 pounds on the dot.
Yeah, so that's 110 pounds doing repeated backflips on stage. And this was filmed way back in the beginning of motion pictures. So you can see it's like black and white, and it's almost like chopping frame to frame, but you can literally see him repeatedly doing this. He used to take a horse, put the stirrups over the top, grab it with one arm, and stand up and walk around the stage. I've got a picture of him squatting on a sawed log, a tree, and there's, I think, 16 or 19 people on top of it. And I think the book said it was a total weight of 1,900 pounds. And the tree was resting on two sawhorses. He picked it up, stood up with it, squatted it down, and then they put the sawhorses back under it. He used to lay on his back in the fish pose, and they would put planks on him and drive a Model T car right over top of him.
Yeah.
I mean, so, I tell people before you start taking drugs, study Eugene Sandow and remember that this guy was doing this in the 1800s when they hadn't invented vitamins yet. They didn't know what protein powders were. Mm-hmm. He did this on solid training and good diet and just knowing what he was doing through becoming an expert through his own practice, training, and guidance from a proper coach.
And that's not somebody that's 6'6" and 400 pounds like our modern day feats of strength individuals do. Like
right. No, he was 5'9", 211.
Which is massive in that day and age. Massive.
He began his career as a circus performer. So he really had developed his nervous system very highly before he got into strength training, which I think is very, very beneficial.
A lot of people don't realize just how much is actually neurological training.
Yes.
It's neurology. Neurology drives everything. So when we start getting actually into really assessing movement, looking at like all the things that we do on soft tissue and these are all just ways of tapping into neurology to elicit an effect. And strength training is so much neurological based.
Yeah, especially when you cross 8 RM and lower. So if you go 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, a buddy of mine, Jerry Telly, was a physiologist and did a ton of research in this area. And he showed that the threshold for neurological drive is 8 RM. And then it becomes more metabolic progressively with higher repetitions. So people wanting to lift 8 RM and less need to do neurological development. But bodybuilding is very metabolic. So this is why you have 8 to 12, and you need to produce the lactic acid and stimulate muscle growth and hypertrophy that way. But having done all sorts of movement screens with my primal pattern system on every level of athletics, from prodigy child athletes in Olympic training camps to the best athletes in the world, like Russian Olympic lifters, one of the things that was always shocking to me is when I worked for professional sports teams that adopted bodybuilding training, their motor skills began to degenerate terribly. And they had very poor coordination because they were doing all this machine type training where they didn't have to use their core balance. They didn't have to have a good biomotor profile. They were using, isolation training and like professional rugby players. I mean, that's a very neurologically demanding sport, yet they're training with bodybuilding tactics. And I've had multiple professional teams sell all their hammer strength and Cybex and kitted them out with proper free weights and taught them how to lift weights properly and radically transform the team. Hi, everybody. I've looked into magnesium supplements in my many years as a therapist and found, unfortunately, most of them are junk. Until the day Wade Lightheart handed me his magnesium breakthrough from Bioptimizers, which is a very, very specialized product that they did a lot of research on Wade, I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about what makes magnesium breakthrough so unique and so potent.
Well, number one is that we realized that different types of magnesium are absorbed by different parts of the body. So we tested virtually every magnesium product there was on the market, and it came down to 7 different ones that produced the best aspects or best effects over the broadest amount of people. We combined them without any weird excipients or, some of the chemical agents that other companies use. We don't use any of that stuff. And we combined it with humic and fulvic acid as well as B6 to make sure that it's absorbed and utilized by the body.
That's excellent. I really love it because one of the things I love about all your products is I can actually turn people onto them. They buy them, and I've never had a single person say to me, those products don't work. Everybody that I know has continued to buy Bioptimizer's products to enhance their life. Where can people get it, and what's their discount?
Just go to www.magbreakthrough.com/living4D and put in your coupon code Paul10 and you get a 10% discount. And of course, everything has a 100% money back guarantee.
You can't get better than that. Enjoy. Who have been some of the greatest influences on your development of healthy strength? And what were the qualities that they modeled to you?
So I've already kind of mentioned a couple of those, like Hippocrates. We talked about Attila. Well, that wasn't his actual name. It was Lou Dorscher, if I
can't remember.
Well, I talked a lot about the reading that I did growing up, right?
Yeah.
And so my family, my parents were really into music, the arts, just some of the classical period stuff. And I think it's interesting to look at some of the Renaissance men.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Leonardo da Vinci and Batista, for example, in the same time period, were like incredibly, like people. Leonardo would bend up horseshoes as entertainment, and people only think about him
as an artist or
as
a
an
scientist.
Artist. And Batista was big in the architecture at the same time. He was a fighter, but I believe he was like 5'10" and 215 pounds. Both were massive into physical culture. And like I said, Leonardo was well known for like the party tricks or things that he would do to exhibit that physical stuff. So they were very, they were massive individuals, and that was a very, anyway, I think it's interesting. It's things like that really inspired, because I was constantly, for me, it was always about this balance of, I was known as, being the smartest kid and being this intellectual. And I always wanted to have like this balance of, how I was brought up is, strong back, strong mind, these are, balance. And like my stepfather was he wasn't anti-intellectual, because that's what, like I said, that was kind of but he was anti-intellectuals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so he was always, pushing me on that, those concepts of being like, yes, be smart, but know how to use your hands and exhibit strength and
practical knowledge.
Exactly. And so this was like a big influence on me growing up. And my parents had a lot of time to spend with me as well, because they didn't have really normal jobs to go to. And so it was, family was everything. And we spent a lot of time together. So it's, anyway, some of these odd figures are ones that kind of stand out in my mind, because that's also the resources that I had. I didn't have, so when I got into training, it was the basic stuff that was available in the 90s, like, Bill Pearl's, book on
Keys to the Inner Universe, or Keys to the Universe.
It was kind of just a more training book of all the different programs laid out, and exercise selection, and then Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, right?
I've got all those. Yeah.
Yeah, so those were like the first foundational like training things that I ever got, which eh, isn't necessarily the best, but it's way better than what a lot of people are seeing today.
I was going to say it's better than most personal trainer certifications today.
Exactly.
What does Kabuki stand for? I keep thinking I got to ask you that, and then I forget to ask you.
A lot of my philosophy is influenced by a mix of both Eastern and Western approaches. So, particularly in the business world, I implemented a lot of Japanese-based philosophy in the operations environment, and I'm working on my next book, Create Shit, Do Shit, Live Beyond the Limits, which is a business leadership goal setting and execution book. And I use a lot of, like in there, I'm using a lot of concepts around Hoshin Kanri, which is basically a strategic policy deployment through organization. So there ends up being a lot of Japanese influenced philosophy and things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And Kabuki it's the mask that is it's a form of theater where a mask is put on and, you go out and do your acting. And typically it's, I believe it's female as well. So you think about the feminine energy that we were talking about as well. I'm definitely not afraid of that. But I also relate it to that discussion I had earlier where I was talking about, in the moment, in the 15, 20 seconds that I'm after a big lift, I reach into a place that is not where I would walk around at or be at. And we also see that in a lot of different societies, well, most, societies in this practice of going to war or things like that, where a face paint, is applied or something like that, because you have to become something that isn't you.
You got to go make a state shift.
Exactly. To be, you're no longer the father, the member of the community. Like, you're going to go have to do some things to be able to protect that would normally be outside of. So you become another person. And so in the context of Kabuki, we have this squat face, which is this rendition basically of kind of my face, but it could be anyone's face, and this what your face looks like in the middle of a squat. And we call get your squat face on.
I can see it on your shirt.
Yeah. So, yep, there it is. That's the squat face. So get your squat face on, and it comes down to that same message mentality. I can provide you the equipment and I can provide you the methodology, but what I can't do is give you the third piece that you need, which is the mental side of it, to get your game day face on, to get your squat face on. And that's where the Kabuki comes from. So
that's very cool. The journey of your life and the challenges you've faced are the kind that generally lead someone into a deeper spiritual connection with themselves and their version of source, whatever that might be. For some, it's God. For some, it's the universe. For some, it's science. Can you share your spiritual philosophy and how that's helped you navigate the challenges of your life in the past, present, and how you think this is going to help you in the future?
I'm a very spiritual person, but this is not a conversation that for me is something that I want to put out in a public sphere because it is just it's I don't know. There's just a lot of nuance and context and stuff to that, but I'm a spiritual person.
What does spirituality mean to you?
It means to me the connection to the greater fabric of the universe.
That's beautiful. My definition of spirituality is connection to a greater whole.
Yes, that's it.
That's it. That's good.
It. Yep.
That's a safe place to be. That's better than the God that'll burn you in hell for doing steroids.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about this next question. What are some of the benefits of effective strength development on the individual's psyche or psychology, and how do they translate to living a better life? So if there's anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to add there, we've talked about resilience. We've talked about freedom. One of the things that I know from studying the effects of weightlifting on women is they showed consistently that it increased their sense of autonomy, which is a really beautiful thing, especially in a patriarchal world, which we need to switch quickly before we destroy ourselves. But I'm just curious if you have any more comments on strength training and its effect on a person's inner life.
Yeah. So, and we also touched on, self-confidence as well. For me, it is kind of that meditative practice. It's the time to step away from everything that's going on in the world, your life, and spend time with yourself, that connectedness of mind to body, and get in that zone, which I think is really healthy to be able to have that. So for that aspect can be had for a lot of different, strength training isn't the only way to tap into that, obviously, but you can learn to do that via strength training. It doesn't have to be yoga, stretching, meditation. There's all, but when you do that, it is definitely it's not walking into the gym for a big, heavy crushing it workout either. So, but that's another way. One of the things that I think a lot of people really miss with strength training is the ability to learn things about how to manage things in your life, to manage things in your business, to learn things about yourself. And by that, I mean, we see people that maybe are crazy successful in business, their ability to manage projects, deal with adversity, stress, things that come up, yet they have to have a trainer and they really just don't capture, and they're not able, something happens, an injury, so on, and it like blows up their world. Or you see the other side of that, the meathead in the gym that can create a structured, plan, overcome obstacles, and they're basically doing project management. They're doing like all these things that would make them really successful in life or in the work environment, yet not realize that they have those skills and ability,
Right.
and translate that into those, and really, and so you see them, flailing around in their life a little bit, or in their bouncing from job to job because they're not really able to perform well. And it's like, hey, you actually know how to do all this so much. You've been doing this for a decade. Like, just turn the switch. And so I think that there's a lot of missed opportunities that people have in getting that connectedness, the ability to, understand and be able to live in comfort with strength, or with fear, the ability to know like how to turn into it, to which is sometimes that opportunity to add and chase the things that are going to make you more resilient in the rest of your life. So like walking up to a heavy squat bar. If you're sitting there and you're running through all the ways, everything that can go wrong during the lift, and I'm going to blow out my knee and my back, and then this, like bone's going to be shooting out the side of my leg, and I'm second guessing myself. You're never going to be able to pull off that lift. There's a level of so getting in that zone where you're able to go, okay, this is it. I'm focusing. I'm stepping away from that. These are all things that, hey, that's the same process when you're, thinking about going into the unknown, like quitting your job and going back to school, making a career change, taking the next step with a relationship, those sorts of things. They're all the same thing, right? And the ability to explore your limits. We're defined by knowing if finding your limits helps you find yourself. And every training session is an opportunity to go explore where those limits are. Look over the edge. Don't go over the edge, but find out where it's at. And maybe next time, see if it's moved a little bit over the last time, right?
Yes.
And nobody knows where that is and whether you've actually gotten there other than yourself. Nobody. And I'm getting a little bit philosophical on some of these, but there's
that's
so
okay on
much,
my podcast. Go for
it. There's so many tie-ins to different aspects of your life or spirituality and so on via training that we miss that opportunity all the time, because we think about it as, it's our way to lose weight. It's our way to look better. It's a way to, hit some PRs. It can be so much more.
Yes. Well, if you look at something very simple, the 3 phases of a lift are setup, execution, and follow through. So if you just understand those 3 principles and say, okay, how does that apply to my life? Well, how do you start your day? You got to start your day. You got to set it up. Then you have to execute it. And then you got to follow through. If you don't follow through, you don't finish. And if you don't finish, you don't rest. And if you don't rest, you burn out. So there's like many of the key principles that are essential for effective strength and conditioning are actually philosophically the same principles that we need in life. But as you said, a lot of people don't make the transfer. They might be very good in the gym, but they don't realize the same concepts you're using to develop strength and athletic ability can extend into your marriage, to your business, to your friendships. And I think a lot of people, I think part of the evolution of athletic conditioning is to bring it into the human sphere of connection and relationship and practical application for the tasks and the demands and the challenges of everyday life, so that people realize that going to the gym isn't just strictly about your body. It's learning to deal with resistance, not only in the gym, but in life. It's learning to deal with relationships. It's learning to deal with how your body's responding to what you're eating and how your sleep's affecting you. So if a person starts thinking of their life as what's coming into the gym, I tell people nobody can leave their divorce or their financial stress at the front door of a gym. But if you understand these things as a coach, then you might understand why an athlete's having a hard time performing. And you might start asking better questions instead of just pushing the person who's just lost a loved one to a disease or something, and you don't know it, and you think they're being a pussy, but they're not. They're just too much of their emotional energy is not available to express in the external of themselves.
And people, that's interesting. People ask me a lot about, how demanding like the training for the grand goals was and the squat. And I always talk about how emotionally draining it was. And they're like, what? And I'm like, to be able to train at that level was sucking all of my emotional energy out. And so it took me a long time to recover, like months before I started really coming back. People are like, what are you talking about? And it's like, they can't connect that, but it's drawing from that area is consuming those resources.
In chapter 9 in your book, it's on legacy. Love it if you could share what legacy means to you and why you think it's important to find and determine what our legacy is.
So for me, my legacy comes from the biggest thing for me is being able to show my children that they can create the world around them. I can talk, I can do whatever, but there's nothing better way than I can do it by actually leading by example and showing them. And I don't know what it is going to be for them, but to show them that they can create what they want and how they want to be in the world and the world around them. And so to me, that's the biggest thing for me.
Why do you think it's important for others to figure out what their legacy is?
Just the simple fact of why are you here to begin with? If there's no purpose behind that, I have trouble like even grasp. That's why I laughed, because it's just fundamental of like, who are you as a person? Why are you here? What are you meant to do? Coming to terms and finding that is going to help you really find your seat and center in life. Your well-being. It is not here to find comfort and find some job that you can just get to the weekend so you can watch the game and drink a few beers and then get to retirement and then your deathbed and go, well, that was a nice ride. Like, why? What did it's not to have your name etched in stone somewhere, but to be able to how did you positively impact the world?
Yes.
How did you leave it better in some fashion for your being there?
Amen.
Like, these are quintessential, like this is the question of life, right? That is your question.
Those are issues of meaning making.
Yeah,
Without meaning, there's no juice flowing through you.
absolutely.
You're
That's
a
dead.
corroded.
I can't even fathom living in that fashion. Like
Yeah.
it's baffling to me.
Okay, so here's a good question for you. What percentage of the population in the world do you think is doing exactly that right now?
Oh, at least 80%.
Yeah, I would
At
have to
least.
say somewhere between 80 and
Yeah.
90%. And
Yep.
that's scary.
I know. It is really scary.
It's scary because people that don't have something
They're
greater than
taught
themselves,
to be a consumer, to consume the
yes,
things,
they
to
exist to consume, and that's
you
killing the
exist to
planet.
consume, to find, to find comfort, to find satiety, to find like, this is what you, let's plug into this device and watch that and eat
Yeah.
this. And
And believe everything you're told and become highly gullible because you've never had enough reason to live enough to have to research things and figure out what the truth is on any topic. So you just believe every shit that you see on a screen. And here we are, boys and girls. Look around.
yep.
Find yourself before somebody harvests you.
Did you know that Symbiotica means harmony? And you're really likely to enjoy my podcast with Shervin Jaffaria, the founder of Symbiotica. Symbiotica is an amazing company that makes excellent products to aid healing, enhance longevity, and improve performance at all levels of your being, from your spiritual practices to your athletic endeavors. I highly recommend you go to Symbiotica.com and check out their top-notch organically sourced products that include excellent tasting supplements like their Synergy Vitamin B12, which elevates energy naturally, to their Shilajit minerals, which help you better regulate your hormonal system. Their Biocharge activated coconut charcoal is an excellent detox support and removes toxins and poisons from the body quickly and non-invasively. Their organic longevity formula is one of my friends and students' favorites. They rave about it. I really enjoy their Regenesis liposomal glutathione for its amazing antioxidant powers, which is really helpful for anyone that enjoys vaporizing tobacco and herbs like I do. They also have great immune support products, water filtration options for drinking and showering, and some cool clothing and more. And use your Living4D discount code. You get 15% off anything they sell, and you won't be disappointed. Enjoy Symbiotica.
I'm curious, what do you think the current trends in strength development are, and what do you see unfolding as likely trends in strength development in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
So we've seen a lot of shift in the last decade, maybe 15 years, towards group training. So we see this like with the explosion of CrossFit, along with many other areas. But we also see a lot of issues with that. And I think the next trend, the big trend, and this is towards individualization of that group training. How do we, with the tools that we have at our disposal, how do we create that? Obviously, you're going to see along with that a lot of, and we've already seen this with the current environment, how things this last year accelerated current trends. So the big box, everything fits everything. Gyms, they were already failing. It pushed it over the edge. But we're going to see a lot more cultured and catered environments that are going to be successful, right? So it's going to be your MMA-ish gym. It's going to be Brazilian jiu-jitsu, a CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting, a powerlifting, whatever it is. It's a specific environment. It's a methodology, so on.
More specialized.
So we're going to see those be successful. We're going to see a lot more of like I said, the individualization of the group training. So this movement away from stuffing everybody through the same boxes, but how do we still offset and get the most resources from one trainer with a group of people to maximize overhead costs and training costs? We're going to see a lot more of the shift that's happened this last year to people taking on and owning their own fitness, is in building garage gyms, studios, things of that nature. So I really love seeing that. And man, there definitely is a lot more focus on health at some level that has gone on in the last year, which I see positive. It needs to go so much further than where it's at. But somebody picking up a kettlebell and doing a little running or whatever it is, like putting some component of that in your house, in your daily process, and not relying on, again, this
corporate fitness.
this corporate fitness, this mash. We can create this thing that fits everybody's needs, yet fits no one's needs.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
So those are the big trends and shifts that I see, and this is something that I've seen for a while, and this is why we make the products and that we do, because they fit this environment. They don't fit the big box gym. It's with one product you can do a whole lot of different stuff in your garage gym. With a group training, we can rapidly accommodate from one individual to a next to meet their needs, but we're all still doing kind of set up and doing the same thing, but it's been individualized. How do we use technology to manage some of those things that the coach's eye should be able to see, but you're not going to have a personal coach for everybody out there. So how do we tap into being able to measure heart rate variability and, the bar speed and other things that are insights into what's happening to the nervous system, so that we can manage our training, so that we're not taking this type A driver that, or somebody that's just had some major, someone pass away and a major stress and upheaval and lack of sleep in their life, and just keep pounding away at them. Right.
Right. Yeah.
A good coach is going to see that stuff, but I think having some objective data. So I think that there's going to be there's going to be a way to be able to start marrying both the art of training with technology, not relying on either one as the answer necessarily. I think they're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah. I think the biohacking thing's gotten out of control, and there's always going to be people that are pushing that into transhumanism and, weird shit. But I think that I agree that if we use biohacking intelligently for people that don't have a skilled coach, then they can get feedback so that they find the sweet spot between training enough and not training too little, resting adequately, and getting information that they normally wouldn't get without someone that has a lot of skill and knows what questions to ask and what symptoms to look for.
Exactly. But we can't, reach all the way there and say, this is how we're doing. Because who's the person writing the algorithms? It's some, person that knows math that's never touched the train. Like, well, my thing says this. Well, I don't trust the person that wrote the thing. Right.
Right. Yes.
But when I watch that data, I can see trends and I can go, okay, here's a change that's happened based on what I'm doing with my training, and it's not moving the right direction. All right, I'm going to make a shift. And that's where things start. Once we start getting some more of the coaching intervention, using and understanding the tools and revising how it's used, then we can really start making it more viable than what it has been.
Yeah. One of the things I tell athletes and people in general about all the, biofeedback, classically called biohacking devices, I say, first of all, you're not an algorithm. Algorithms are based on averages, and usually they're praised for being more accurate by the size of the study. So I say, here's an example. This is what me talking to my students or my patients. I say, did you know that if you have a pile of rocks of 10 tons with an average weight of 2 kilograms, you may not actually find a single rock in there that weighs 2 kilograms?
Yeah.
And the point obviously is you might be the 2 kilogram stone that does not fit the algorithm, but you're going to be adapting your training to a device that thinks you're somebody else.
But the device doesn't know your plan or as well.
Yes.
So
yes.
let's say
your stresses.
it says I'm supposed to take it easy today. That's just what it says. So I can't do it. I mean, it's like, well, does it know that I'm actually leading up and accumulating fatigue as per plan because I'm going to peak at a certain phase, or I have a week of vacation planned. So this is like a couple days. I'm going to build up a little bit more fatigue before going in because I'm going to take a break, or like, it doesn't know any of this stuff. It just says, here's the data, take it easy.
Yeah.
Again, based on an algorithm that, again, what's the background behind the algorithm and stuff like that. But there's also still some valuable stuff if we learn how to go there. And so it's that's the trend, is actually finding how to use some of that hard objective data with actually intelligent coaching and a plan, right?
It's been a long time since I've been in the gym industry, so to speak. For 25 years, me and my wife traveled the world and lived on airplanes and, went to gyms everywhere. And so I had my finger on the pulse of, many, many countries. I was making it around the world twice a year for over 20 years. So, but once I went through my midlife crisis, I had to stop traveling because that was part of the thing that was just killing me, living on airplanes for that long. It didn't matter how much Tai Chi I ate or how good I ate, how much Tai Chi I did or how much well I ate. I was so taxed at a core level from constantly having to output, constantly moving, that I just had to stop traveling. So, and I have a beautiful gym with everything that I'll ever need here to train anybody, and a big, huge rock lifting area and hiking and swimming pool. I mean, I'm living in my dream house, so I don't even know if I remember how to drive. I think in the year we've lived here, I've probably driven my car like 6 times, and I get in there and I go, "Oh yes, it's my beautiful Audi. What do I do with it?" But I was wondering what your thoughts are on strength development for children under the age of 13. There's a lot of people out there that feel free weight should be avoided until the growth plates in the bones mature, and others don't feel that this is a relevant concern.
I think it's the wrong question. It's not the age, it's the development of the motor patterns.
Yeah.
So if I have somebody that's 10 years old that has high quality motor patterns, I can add load to that. But
Yes.
I could have a 16-year-old that is a motor moron, and I'm not going to load that. We need to have good movement before we add load to have some adaptation. Is that simple. So it really, there's no way to answer that except on an individual level and look at that. And I'm blown away when I see these, like the teen coaches at powerlifting meets, and they're there with somebody that's like squatting on one leg with the other one caved in. And it's just like, oh yeah, more load that. And I'm just like,
yeah, same with
okay,
CrossFit.
Like that's not okay. Like, but there could be somebody younger that I'm totally adept to, like, yeah, let's freaking go for it. Oh my God, that person is moving so clean. They've got so much awareness of their body in space. And yes, let's add some load. We can develop those. So what patterns do we want to develop? If we don't have the ability to do that, like my daughter is 9, I would much rather work with her than my son who's 12, because she has that. And my son is not as, capable in that manner. It doesn't have the same level of development as she does. She's a born athlete. She goes to the gym. She lifts with me on occasion. Like I've thrown up videos of her deadlifting with our trap bar, and it's perfect.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach, and I take that approach myself. I was just curious what your thoughts were. Do you know who Al Vermeil is? I haven't talked to Al for a long time. I'm hoping he's still alive. He's probably pretty old by now. You familiar with Al Vermeil?
The name sounds familiar, but I no.
He's probably the most successful strength coach in the world. When I worked for him, I worked for the Bulls many times. I had an open door policy with the Chicago Bulls. He was their strength coach for the whole Jordan era. He had 13 championship rings between NBA and NFL. He worked for a number of the NFL teams, but he had actually 13 championship rings from the NFL and the NBA.
Now I remember why his name rings a bell. Yes, I've.
And
yes.
He's got a great book on strength development. He basically felt that kids should all start with body weight exercises and master their body weight, and use calisthenics to develop their motor skills, their coordination, and their basic core strength before that they should be put into resistance training programs. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value in that approach.
I agree. Yeah. I think that there's not every, force vector that we can attack via calisthenics, but the general concept of what he's saying, yes. But there may be something like, hey, we're going to do some goblet squats or something like that too, mixed in there. Saying, hey, when we put limits and say this is the only way, that's where I have struggle. There's always context, right? So,
Oh
but
yeah,
I
yes.
fully agree with the contextually with what he's saying there 100%.
Yeah, I'm using broad brushstrokes.
Yeah, exactly. So yes.
I've worked with a lot of elite childhood athletes and Olympic committees that have development teams. So, for example, I worked with the U.S. Olympic figure skating development team, which is all kids between about 8 and 16 that don't go to regular schools. They only focus on figure skating, and their schooling is secondary to that. So some of these kids are spending 6-8 hours a day on the ice. I've worked with hockey teams that are developmental teams. I've worked with schools that are special schools for kids with the specialized skills like athlete development, or schools focusing on a specific area, maybe business development. But a lot of the kids I've worked with have come from these specialized areas. And unfortunately, a lot of them have highly spent years. There might be 16. They've already spent 10 years doing nothing but specialized training for a given sport. And that's not healthy for them.
That is so bad. That is so bad. So this is something I really feel strongly on, is like in those developmental years, all the way up through late teens, like we should be having a broad base of both athletic and physical. And we see this like over and over again. Many of our high level athletes had that. This specialization is what leads to both a physical, mental, and emotional burnout. You get the college, they're already done. You get high school, they're having surgeries. They're doing it at some point now because just their coaches and their parents want them to do it, but they have no desire. Like it beats them up. Like there is absolutely no reason for specialization, whether they're going to be a football star or not. They're going to be that regardless, and getting them an exposure to numerous different, activities over the course is going to be so much better for their physical development as well as the mental and emotional side of things as well.
Yeah, it also leads to a lot of psychological trouble and drug addiction, a lot of addiction and eating disorders.
Early specialization is like repeatedly shown to be really bad, and you can see it on an individual level.
It's pretty shocking how much of it there is going on around the world.
I know, when it's so obviously not good. You can see it from an empirical basis as well as from the research. Like, where else do you need to see it?
Having worked in this field for 37 years and worked with piles of these people, I can tell you what the common denominator is. It's mom and dad who think that their child is going to get rich and famous and make their life easier. I've seen it over and over again, and it's sad because
they want them to accomplish what they wanted to always accomplish and couldn't do. Yeah.
What they don't realize is they're putting adult responsibilities on a child. And when you get to the professional leagues or you win your medal, we'll buy a big house and we'll be able to do this. It's like, you're not supposed to hand a child those kinds of concerns.
No.
Because it kills the child.
Yes.
there's
I know this. Like I said, I survived, but most people do not.
No, I survived, but my brother did not.
Yes, my brother did not either.
Yeah. By the time he was 7th grade, he was a drug addict and he committed suicide at 34. And when I look back on it, it's a miracle that any of us survived. And I just, if there's any parents listening, the best thing I can tell you is let your kid be a fucking kid. Let him play.
Exactly.
Life will deliver plenty of stress and plenty of adult responsibilities. Wait till they leave home. Introduce them to responsibility one step at a time, and know that if they're getting cranky and
progressive loading, it's the same. It's the same stuff over again, right? When we talk about gym things playing a role in other areas.
Yes, progressive loading of the child.
Yeah, exactly.
Very progressive, please.
Yes.
Chris, is there anything that you'd like to share that we haven't covered? And before we finish, where can people find any of your offerings? I know your book's on Amazon, but anything else that you'd like to share, and where do you want to direct people to get more information on everything you do?
Yeah. So my personal website is got links to all the businesses. So it's Chris Duffin. That's like muffin, but with a D. Or
Okay.
ChristopherDuffin.com, ChrisDuffin.com. You could just type my name, Chris Duffin, in Google. I'll come up. Pretty easy. Kabuki Strength, Kabuki Strength, is the best biomechanically sound barbells in the world, soft tissue tools, all sorts of stuff. We've got some really incredible products launching this month. One being called the Q-Bell, again, Japanese, which is a new handheld weight that allows us to be able to actually manipulate the force curve during movement, do mechanical drop sets, all sorts of things through variable loading. I've got a patent pending flywheel device. It's the very first horizontal and vertical flywheel system. So really incredible product for tendon stiffness and health. Increases metabolic effect because you have constant time under tension. Explosive force development for field athletes and things like that, sprinters, runners, field athletes, jumpers. Both those are coming out this month. So really excited about that. The best minimalist shoes out there, in my opinion, widest toe box, lowest durometer sole for that sheer grip that you need during lifting, and they look great. Barefoot, as in BEAR. So imagine me living in the woods, foot.com. Supplementation, build fast formula. So I put together a discount code for your listeners. For
great.
all the sites.
Feel free to share.
It's just Chek. So use Chek. For Kabuki, it's going to give you, go to our movement library. So you find KMS or kabuki.ms for movement system. 2 months for free to our index video library.
Great.
With code Chek, 15% off build fast formula supplements and 20% off barefoot athletics shoes and accessories. So
fantastic. Beautiful.
And you can get a free audio download of my book if you go through my website, of it and another book if you sign up through Audible through that. So chrisduffin.com. So really great pack. Pick your stuff. I just hope people enjoyed the conversation. I'm not big on pitching stuff. I believe in what I do.
Excellent. Well, what a great conversation. We covered a lot, and what a fascinating story as well. And having looked through your book, I think it's a great read for a lot of people. I think it's a really good read for people that are having challenges with the whole, pandemic environment and feel trapped and don't really see how to get out of it. And for anybody that's really stuck maybe in the past and their pain and doesn't realize that human beings are capable of, rising from the ashes and becoming something new.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. I agree.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to all of you guys for listening and being part of my podcast tribe and the Institute tribe. And thank you for anything you buy from the sponsors of the podcast. They're excellent, beautiful people with amazing core values who put money into the farmers that take care of the planet. So whenever you buy something from them, you're doing something good for the earth. And a little bit of that goes to me to keep the podcast going so I can keep sharing people like Chris with you, and we can all get stronger and wiser together and help make the world a better place for all living beings. So lots of love to all of you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Chris Duffin. Connect with Chris on Instagram, on LinkedIn, or on Facebook at Chris Duffin Strong. Chris is generously offering Paul's listeners 2 months free access to his movement library on kabuki.ms using the code Chek. Remember, you can read the show notes and find links to the resources mentioned in this episode at chekinstitute.com/podcast.